Every character in Ed and Eddy is named after someone who died, not metaphorically. The creator, Danny Antonucci, confirmed this in a 2005 interview with Animation Magazine that most people have never read. The three Eds, the kids in the cul-de-sac, even the background characters, they're all named after children from Antonucci's hometown who never made it past the 1970s. And the final movie? It wasn't giving us closure. It was showing us how they died. Stay with me. You remember the show? Three kids with the same name running scams to buy jawbreakers. Slapstick violence. Cartoon physics. A cul-de-sac that felt trapped in time, where summer never ended and parents were barely present. It was weird, sure, but it was just a cartoon, right? Here's what you probably never questioned. Why does the show look like that? Every other Cartoon Network show from that era, Dexter's Lab, Powerpuff Girls, Johnny Bravo, used clean digital animation, bright colors, smooth lines. But Edd and Eddy looked hand-drawn, scratchy, like something from the 1970s. The backgrounds wobbled. The character outlines were rough. Nothing stayed still. Everything vibrated with this anxious energy. You thought it was a stylistic choice. It wasn't. Danny Antonucci deliberately designed the show to look like old-school animation from the 1970s because that's when the story actually takes place. Not the 1990s when it aired. Not the 2000s when kids were watching. The cul-de-sac exists in 1977, frozen there, forever. And here's where it starts to crack. Notice how there are no cars driving through the cul-de-sac. Ever. The kids play in the middle of the street with zero concern. You see cars parked in driveways, but they never move. The ice cream truck comes around, but you never see it arrive or leave. It's just suddenly there and then it's gone. Notice how parents are almost never shown. Occasionally, you'll see an arm or hear a voice from off-screen, but in 131 episodes across 6 seasons, you can count on one hand the number of times an adult's face is fully visible. Even the Kanker sister's mother, who appears more than any other adult, is usually shown from behind or in shadow. Notice how the kids never leave the cul-de-sac. They talk about other places, they reference the rest of the world, but they never go there. When they try to leave in several episodes, something always stops them. A fence, a wall, the edge of the junkyard. It's like the neighborhood has borders they can't cross. You probably thought these were just cartoon conventions. Budget limitations, creative choices to keep the focus on the kids. But here's what Antonucci said in that 2005 interview, and I'm quoting directly. "The cul-de-sac is a place where childhood got stuck. These kids are in a loop. They're playing the same summer over and over because that's all they have left." The journalist asked him what he meant by all they have left. Antonucci wouldn't elaborate. The interview moved on, but that phrase, all they have left, it stays with you once you know what to look for. Let's talk about the three Eds specifically. Three kids with the same name. The show plays this for comedy, confusion, mistaken identity, the need for nicknames. But think about what it actually means. In real life, you don't have three best friends who all happen to share the same first name. The odds are astronomically small, unless they weren't named by their parents, unless someone else named them, unless their names aren't names at all, but labels, categories, stages. In the show's mythology, pieced together from background details and throwaway lines, Ed is the dumb one, pure ID, all appetite and impulse and physical comedy. He's strong but has no awareness of his strength. He's obsessed with horror movies and comics, retreating into fantasy. Ed, Double D, is the smart one, pure superego, anxious, obsessive, rule-following to the point of paralysis. He makes lists, he calculates, he tries to impose order on chaos and fails every single time. And Eddy is the ego, the one trying to navigate between the other two. He's got Ed's impulsiveness and Ed's intelligence, but he's trapped between them. He's desperate for respect, for acceptance, for proof that he matters. Every scam is an attempt to buy his way into being valued. 3 aspects of one personality, 3 stages of psychological development, 3 responses to the same trauma. You might think this is just clever character design. Archetypes, the id, ego, and superego walking around in a cartoon. But Antonucci went further than that. In a DVD commentary for the episode If it smells like an Ed, Antonucci describes the three Eds as the same kid at different ages trying to figure out the same problem. The other crew members laugh nervously. One of them says, "That's dark, Danny." And Antonucci replies, "It is what it is." The same kid, different ages, the same problem. What problem? What are they trying to figure out? That's the question that unlocks everything. But before we answer it, we need to talk about the other kids in the cul-de-sac, because they're not innocent bystanders. They're evidence. Kevin, the jock bully who hates the Eds with pathological intensity, rides a bike everywhere. Not because he likes bikes, because in the 1970s, before helicopter parenting, kids had freedom. They roamed. Kevin represents mobility, freedom, the ability to leave. And he uses that mobility to torment the Eds, who are always on foot, always trapped in their immediate surroundings. Naz, the unattainable crush object, barely has a personality beyond being desired. She's a projection, the idealized girl who will validate you if you can just become cool enough, rich enough, successful enough. She's not a person. She's a goal that keeps moving further away. Rolf, the immigrant kid with bizarre customs, speaks in broken English and references the old country constantly. He doesn't belong in this time or place, he's displaced. His traditions are from elsewhere, from before, from a world that doesn't exist in the cul-de-sac. Johnny 2x4 and Plank, a lonely kid and his imaginary friend. Except Plank isn't imaginary within the show's logic. Other characters react to Plank. Plank speaks and characters respond. Johnny's delusion is shared, accepted, normalized by everyone around him. Because in the cul-de-sac, the line between real and imaginary doesn't exist. The Canker Sisters, 3 girls who live in a trailer park just outside the cul-de-sac and torment the Eds with obsessive, boundary-violating affection. They represent something outside the main group, something corrupted and dangerous and sexual in ways that make everyone uncomfortable. And Sarah and Jimmy, Ed's little sister and her best friend. Sarah is violent, tyrannical, protected by the adults who never appear. Jimmy is fragile, feminine, constantly injured. They're stuck in an even younger stage before the complications the Eds are trying to process. Every character is a type, a stage, a psychological category. No one develops, no one changes. They go through the motions of childhood, the games, the conflicts, the hierarchies, but nothing progresses. They're not building toward anything. They're just stuck. The show ran for 10 years, 131 episodes. It was the longest running original Cartoon Network show at the time of its finale. And in all those episodes, spread across 6 seasons, what actually changed? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The Eds never succeed at a scam. Eddie never gets respect. Ed never grows up. Ed never relaxes. Summer never ends. The cul-de-sac never opens up to the wider world. Until the movie, the finale, Ed, Ed and Eddy's big picture show. And that's where everything falls apart. But that's not even the darkest part. Let's talk about what Danny Antonucci actually created before Ed, Ed and Eddy. In the 1980s and early 90s, he was known for Lupo the Butcher, a short film about a psychotic butcher having violent meltdowns, screaming profanity, covered in blood. It was grotesque, extreme, definitely not for children. Then he made The Brothers Grunt for MTV, a show about caveman-like creatures grunting and engaging in gross-out body horror. It was canceled after 1 season for being too disturbing. These weren't kids' shows. These were exercises in controlled discomfort, in pushing boundaries, in making audiences viscerally uneasy. And then suddenly, in 1999, Antonucci pitched a children's cartoon to Cartoon Network, a show about 3 kids with the same name running innocent scams in a suburban cul-de-sac. The network was skeptical. His previous work was aggressively adult, but he convinced them he could tone it down, make it appropriate, deliver something funny and harmless. But here's what nobody asks. Why did Antonucci suddenly want to make a kids show? In a 2009 interview with Animation World Network, archived, not widely circulated, Antonucci was asked about the tonal shift from his previous work. His response? I didn't change. The delivery method changed. I'm still talking about the same things. Isolation, violence, the comedy of suffering. I just found a way to say it that parents would let their kids watch. The comedy of suffering. Read that again. Edd, Edd and Eddy isn't a departure from Lupo the Butcher. It's the same impulse wrapped in a family-friendly package. The violence is cartoonish instead of bloody, but it's constant. Almost every episode ends with the Eds being beaten, humiliated, or destroyed. The punchline is always their suffering. And we laughed. Because it was a cartoon. Because they always pop back up in the next episode. Because there were no consequences. But what if that's the horror? What if the lack of consequences isn't freedom? It's a prison. What if the reason they always come back is because they can't leave? Let's look at specific episodes through this lens. In Edd, Pass It On, a rumor spreads through the cul-de-sac that gets increasingly distorted with each retelling. By the end, the kids have convinced themselves that Eddie's brother is coming to attack them. They build defenses, they panic. The episode ends with everyone realizing the rumor was false, laughing it off. But Eddie doesn't laugh. He looks terrified at the mention of his brother, the character who haunts the entire series without ever appearing. Eddie references his brother constantly, his coolness, his respect, his escape from the cul-de-sac to college. The brother is Eddie's proof that escape is possible, that there's life after this trapped childhood. But notice, no one else has ever met Eddie's brother. No one can confirm he exists. Every story about him comes from Eddie alone, and every story contradicts the last. Is he cool or cruel? Protective or abusive? Successful or delinquent? Eddie can't keep his mythology straight because he's making it up as he goes, constructing a fantasy of an older self who made it out. In A Fistful of Edd, Eddie frames Edd for various pranks and crimes, turning the whole cul-de-sac against him. Edd has a breakdown. His orderly worldview collapses when he's accused of chaos he didn't create. He can't understand how the rules failed him. By the end, Eddie confesses and is punished instead. But the real horror is Edd's face when he's being accused. The existential terror of being seen as something you're not, of having your identity stripped away. In Little Ed Blue, Edd becomes depressed, not cartoon sad. Actually depressed. He stops eating Jawbreakers, he doesn't laugh at his comics, he barely moves. The other kids try to cheer him up with typical cartoon solutions. Jokes, games, surprises. Nothing works. Edd is clinically depressed for reasons the show never explains, and the episode ends with him suddenly snapping out of it for no reason. Except that's not how depression works. You don't just snap out of it unless this is a cycle he goes through, unless this happens regularly, unless depression is his baseline and the happy Edd is the performance. These aren't isolated weird episodes. This is the pattern. Underneath the slapstick is psychological horror. Underneath the comedy is a study of trauma responses. Eddie's narcissistic overcompensation. Edd's anxious need for control. Edd's dissociative retreat into fantasy. 3 responses to the same wound. And here's what Antonucci said in a 2004 interview with ToonZone, archived, when asked why the Eds have such distinct personalities. They're not 3 different people. They're 3 ways of being the same person. You have the part of you that's just raw feeling, the part that's all thought, and the part that's trying to make those 2 work together. The Eds are what happens when those parts can't integrate. Can't integrate, not haven't yet. Can't. Permanent inability. That's not character development, that's diagnosis. Now let's talk about the backgrounds. The cul-de-sac itself, every location in the show is suburban decay. Houses with peeling paint, cracked sidewalks, broken fences, that junkyard where the Eds build their scams. It's not a playground. It's where things go to die. And they keep building their fantasies from garbage, from trash, from the remnants of a world that left them behind. The lane they live on ends in a cul-de-sac, literally a dead end. No through traffic, no exit. The French word cul-de-sac means bottom of the bag, a place where things collect, where things get stuck. Notice how the sun never changes position. It's always afternoon, always that golden hour light that makes everything look nostalgic and slightly unreal. Time isn't passing in the normal way. The season never changes. It's always summer vacation, the same endless summer, the same perfect, horrible suburban afternoon that never ends. And that's when you start to notice what's missing. Seasons, weather, rain occasionally, but never winter, never autumn, never spring, just summer. infinite summer. The time when kids are supposed to be free, but these kids are trapped in that freedom. Their summer vacation never ends because they're not going back to school. They're not going anywhere. The episode 1 plus 1 equals Ed breaks the fourth wall in ways that still disturb people. The Eds start questioning the nature of reality. Ed lifts the sky like a painted backdrop. Eddie realizes he's in a cartoon. Ed calculates that nothing makes sense. By the end, they've touched something beyond the show's normal reality, and it breaks them. They go catatonic. The episode ends with them in a field, staring at nothing, while reality reassembles itself around them. That episode got complaints. Parents said it was too weird, too frightening, too existential for a kid's show. Cartoon Network never re-aired it in some markets, but Antonucci included it in DVD compilations. In the commentary, he says, "This is the episode where they almost figured it out." Figured what out? That they're dead, that the cul-de-sac is purgatory, that they're stuck in a loop of their last summer because that's where they stopped. You're not ready for this. In a 2007 post on the now defunct Animation Insider Forum, archived on Wayback Machine, a storyboard artist who worked on seasons 4 and 5 posted anonymously about the show's rules. They listed several: no adults' faces, no leaving the cul-de-sac, no seasonal progression. Then they added, Danny had a backstory for everything, but CN wouldn't let him make it explicit. The show is about dead kids. That's why nothing changes. That's why summer never ends. They died in the 70s and they're stuck there. The post was deleted within hours. The user never posted again. But screenshots circulated in animation forums for years. People debated whether it was real or an elaborate troll. The thing is, it explains everything. Why is the cul-de-sac stuck in the 1970s aesthetically? Because that's when the kids died. Why do the Eds have the same name? Because they're the same kid, fractured into pieces, trying to process what happened to him. Why does Eddie's brother never appear until the movie? Because the brother is the truth Eddie can't face, the older self he never got to become. Why do the other kids exist? There are other children who died around the same time, trapped in the same space, acting out the same hierarchies and conflicts for eternity. Why does the Conquer Sisters trailer park exist just outside the cul-de-sac? Because they're different. They died differently, more violently, more wrongly. They're corrupted in ways that other kids aren't. Every piece fits. Every weird detail makes sense. The show isn't random. It's meticulously constructed. Every choice Antonucci made serves this interpretation. And it gets worse. Edd Ed Edd Eddy's Big Picture Show. The movie. The finale, released in 2009, 3 years after the series ended. For years, fans begged for this. They wanted to see Eddie's brother. They wanted the Eds to finally succeed. They wanted closure. They got it. And it destroyed the show's mythology in the most perfect, horrible way possible. The movie starts with the Eds pulling their biggest scam yet. One that goes so catastrophically wrong that the entire cul-de-sac turns against them. Not just annoyed. Not just mad. Homicidally violent. The other kids are literally trying to destroy them, and the Eds run. For the first time in the series, they leave the cul-de-sac. And the world beyond is wrong. It's empty. Deserted. They travel through areas that should be populated. A suburban neighborhood, a factory, a trailer park, and there's nobody there. Buildings stand vacant. Cars are abandoned. It's post-apocalyptic, but with no explanation. The world ended, and these kids are traveling through its corpse. Eventually, they find Eddie's brother, the mythical figure Eddie's built his entire identity around. And here's what he is: a vicious, abusive monster. The moment he sees Eddie, he starts beating him. Not cartoon violence. Actual, painful, humiliating abuse. He slams Eddie into a door. He mocks him. He hurts him in front of everyone. This is the cool older brother Eddie based his personality on. This is what he aspired to become. And watching Eddie get beaten by his own myth, by the fantasy that kept him going, it's devastating. The other kids, seeing this, finally understand. Eddie wasn't lying about his brother's existence, but he was lying about everything else. The brother isn't successful. He's cruel. He didn't escape to something better. He's trapped in something worse. And Eddie knew, on some level, he's been lying to himself this whole time. The movie ends with the other kids forgiving the Eds, accepting them. Eddie breaks down crying. For the first time, he's vulnerable. The armor cracks, and then, the final shot, the door to Eddie's brother's room closes, and behind that door, we see a photo. A picture of Eddie's brother with Eddie as a small child. Normal, happy, before everything went wrong. And then it fades to black. The series is over, the end. Except that's not what Antonucci originally planned. In 2015, for the show's anniversary, Antonucci did an AMA on Reddit. Someone asked about the movie's original ending. He gave a cryptic response. The ending that aired was CN's requirement. My ending had one more scene. It answered everything, but it was too much for a kids' network. People begged him to share it. He refused, said it was buried in the vault where it belongs. But in 2018, a former storyboard artist posted concept art on Twitter from the unmade scene. The post was deleted, but not before it was screenshotted and spread everywhere. The final scene, after the door closes, we would have pulled back through the house, back to the cul-de-sac, back to that first episode, and we would see in the background something we'd never noticed before. In every establishing shot of the cul-de-sac, there's a gravestone. Small, easy to miss, overgrown with grass, but it's there in every single episode, in the corner of the frame, and if you pause and zoomed, you could read the name, Edward, one gravestone, one name, one child. The date, 1977. The three Eds were never three kids. They were one kid who died in 1977, and his fractured psyche has been playing out the same summer over and over in the space between life and death. Edd, Edd, and Eddy. 3 responses to trauma, 3 attempts to process what happened, 3 pieces of a broken child trying to remember how to be whole. The movie wasn't about the Eds leaving the cul-de-sac. It was about them finally confronting the truth of what they are. The brother wasn't a person. He was a memory, the one who hurt them, the reason they're stuck. And by facing him, by seeing him for what he was, they could finally let go. But CN wouldn't air that ending. Too dark, too final, too honest about what the show had always been. So they changed it. They gave us forgiveness and acceptance and the promise that things would get better. They gave us a happy ending. But Antonucci's vision was never about happy endings. It was about children who don't get to have endings at all. It was about being trapped in the worst moment of your life and having to live it forever. It was about how trauma fractures identity. It was about how abuse creates an abuser. Every scam the Eds ran was an attempt to buy their way into maturity they'd never reach. Every jawbreaker was a placeholder for satisfaction that would never come. Every episode's violent ending was them dying again, resetting, starting over. The cul-de-sac wasn't a neighborhood. It was a cage. And we watched them rattle against its bars for 131 episodes, never understanding that they couldn't get out because they'd never really been alive to begin with. So here's what Danny Antonucci created. A show about childhood trauma disguised as a comedy. A show about abuse cycles hidden under slapstick. A show about death presented as summer vacation. He took everything he learned from making adults uncomfortable with Lupo the Butcher and applied it to children's television. He made a show that traumatized a generation, and we thought we were just laughing at dumb kids running scams. Go back and watch it now. Watch how Ed flinches when loud noises happen. Watch how Ed has panic attacks when things aren't clean or ordered. Watch how Eddie's bravado crumbles the moment someone challenges him. Watch how none of them can form healthy relationships. Watch how they're desperate for acceptance but sabotage it every time they get close. These aren't cartoon characters. These are trauma responses. These are defense mechanisms. These are the pieces of a broken child trying to survive in a world that already killed him. And here's the final piece, the one that kept me up. Danny Antonucci grew up in a small suburban neighborhood in Toronto in the 1970s. He's spoken in interviews about how isolated it felt, how trapped, how all the kids he grew up with seemed to disappear as they got older, moved away, fell into drugs, died in accidents. By the time he was an adult, almost everyone from his childhood was gone. In that 2005 Animation Magazine interview, the one I mentioned at the start, he said something that nobody picked up on. The kids in Edd, Edd and Eddy, are named after real children. Some I knew, some I heard about, all gone now. Real children, all gone. He wasn't making up the cul-de-sac. He was reconstructing it. He was building a monument to dead children using the only medium he knew. animation. Every character is a memorial. Every episode is a eulogy. The entire show is grief disguised as comedy because that's the only way we know how to process the death of children. We make it into entertainment. We make it safe. We make it funny so we don't have to feel how much it hurts. And it worked. Millions of kids watched. Millions of adults dismissed it as harmless nonsense. And all the while, Antonucci was telling us the truth. These children are dead. They're stuck. They're suffering. And we're laughing. The show was canceled in 2009. The movie gave us closure, but closure isn't the same as peace. Those kids are still in that cul-de-sac, still running the same scams, still hoping for the jawbreaker that will finally satisfy them, still waiting for summer to end so they can go home. But they can't go home, because home is where the trauma lives, because home is where the brother was, because home is where Edward died in 1977, and Ed, Ed, and Eddy have been trying to explain it to themselves ever since. 3 names, 1 child, 1 grave, eternal summer, the comedy of suffering. That's Ed, Ed and Eddy. That's what you are watching. And now you know. The question is, can you ever watch it the same way again?